Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price has just announced that he plans on paying for the charter flights that he took on American taxpayers' dime. And of course, this is following a huge investigation that showed that he racked up hundreds of thousands of dollars in these flights where he traveled to various locations for official business, but on some of those trips, he also went there for personal reasons as well. And so understandably, as someone who considered himself, a fiscal hawk, a real fiscal conservative, he did get quite a bit of criticism and heat for the fact that he was taking these private jets, when in reality, he could have just taken trains or commercial flights and saved US taxpayers a considerable amount of money. Now, Tom Price's official statement in regard to this was that the taxpayers won't pay a dime for my seat on those planes. The announcement follows a political investigation finding that Price had taken at least 26 charter flights costing more than $400,000 since May. Now, there are some predicting that he won't pay that full cost. I'm predicting that he's hoping that this will kind of go away and maybe he won't pay anything. But that's just my speculation, so I want to be clear about that. But apparently after Donald Trump claimed that he might consider firing Tom Price over this, Tom Price decided that he would state that he'd pay for these flights. So thoughts, guys?
It's part of that skinny budget.
Yeah,
skinny budget, $400,000 for charter flights. I think this is, listen, I mean, we don't need any more evidence, and I feel like we're just speaking to our own audience, but at a time when they're talking about the budget, when they're talking about tax cuts, it just doesn't look good, and I think that's why Donald Trump threw him under the bus. But the reality is Politico gonna follow up? Are people gonna be paying attention to whether or not he reimbursed that money? Does anybody know if Donald Trump ever gave money to the veterans like he said he would? This is part of their game, and it distracts away from the real stuff, which is this budget talk, and also paying attention to the Democrats, frankly. I think there's two sides of this. We have to pay attention to the real stuff happening, and when there's an Instagram photo of Stephen Mnuchin's wife, #Hermes, #Louis Vuitton, that's a great piece that reinforced that this is a corporatocracy, and it's the 1% that's ruling Donald Trump's cabinet right now.
It's the swamp, right? It's the same swamp that Trump claimed that he would drain in DC, and he's done the exact opposite. But I do want to just quickly mention that you're right, it certainly doesn't look good when Republicans are pushing for tax cuts, which of course would benefit the wealthy more than anyone else. But I also think that, Trump likes to bully people that don't accomplish his legislative goals. And during his Boy Scouts Jamboree speech, Trump said that, he jokingly said that he would fire Tom Price if he didn't do what was needed to pass the healthcare reform, the repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act. So I think it has maybe something to do with the flights, but in the grand scheme of things, Trump doesn't strike me as someone who really cares about something like that. I think he's just bitter that they lost again when it comes to the healthcare issue.
And actually, neither does Tom Price care about the real issue behind it. So when you see statements of regret or concern or apologies for what they've done and what they're gonna do to I guess, repay their debts, in this case directly, you have to see what their wording is, because you wonder if they've actually learned the lesson. Again, I've said this before, I have a 5-year-old kid, and in TK last year, when there's a conflict, the teacher said, okay, if you apologize for something, what are you apologizing for? Do you know what you did to the other person, and how are you gonna fix it to make sure it doesn't happen again? None of that stuff is ever addressed in these statements by grown-ass men who are in positions of power. So all of my political career, he says, and it's part of a statement, I fought for the taxpayers. It's clear to me that in this case, I was not sensitive enough to my concern for the taxpayers. So Tom, did you forget as you were sitting on the plane with your staff and you were doing the whole thing on the private jet, did you go, I remember back in, was it 08, 06, when he was on shows talking about how he hates the outrageous spending by these Democrats. So are you forgetting? Did you forget? Do you not know what you're doing anymore?
He didn't forget.
No.
I mean,
or do you just not care anymore? So of course, so you have to address that, and so you overlook it. So you don't say, well, I'm gonna go back and think about where I've come from and what I'm gonna do to remedy this situation, not just pay it off. Because again, we don't know if that's gonna happen. But what are you gonna do? How do we trust you again? Is the point?
Right. Look, I don't believe a single member of Congress is a so-called fiscal conservative, right? And by the way, this criticism extends to Democrats as well, because if you're genuinely concerned about, balancing the budget and running the government in a responsible economic way, then you wouldn't continuously support massive increases of funding toward the Defense Department so private contractors can get rich, right? And so look, this $400,000 is shady, and Tom Price deserves the criticism he's getting, especially considering the fact that he's a massive hypocrite when it comes to this issue. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, the biggest amount of waste is not on entitlement programs. It's not on the Affordable Care Act and helping expand Medicaid. It's really when we put money into the military. So the Defense Department can spend $28 million on forest camo gear for Afghan soldiers when they're in a place where only 2% of their land is covered by forest, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's the kind of shit that we shouldn't be spending our money on, okay? If you're a real fiscal conservative, you'd point to that, but they continuously increase the money toward the Pentagon, and it's crazy.
Our government is essentially a money funneling machine for contractors and consultants. You know, the political parties are money funneling machines for the consultants, and contractors make all the money out of our budget. And these are the same people, let's not forget, these are the same people who put out those, and they go on like Fox Business and they talk about, oh my God, the US government spent $40,000 on researching shrimp on treadmills. I mean, that was literally in one of their reports. They find these little things, that's their strategy. Look at all this waste over here, but ignore the waste over here.
Right, I love that you brought up scientific studies and the government subsidizing or helping pay for some of those studies, because they'll look at something like that, which has a purpose. On its face, a study like that might seem ridiculous, but it's usually basic science studies that help us understand the world around us and help in researching bigger things that actually do benefit society. Anyway, look, Republicans have been trying to defund scientific programs for a long time, and at the same time they'll go ahead and they'll increase funding for things that we don't need, which is a bloated defense budget that only benefits private contractors.
There was an update from what we did mention, the Dow, he or she tweeted that Price, this is a Hill article, Tom Price, is apparently gonna pay $52,000 of the estimated $400,000 of the travel costs.
Oh, just that.
Okay, so
like makes that in an hour, or did make that in an hour.
That's insane. All right.
During that flight. One of the flights.
Really.
So a representative for Tom Price indicates that he will only pay $52,000 of the $400,000 that he has racked up from the private jet travel, which is unsurprising. I think we hit the nail on the head when we just suspected that he wouldn't pay the full amount. I to be fair, didn't think he was going to pay any of it.
An eighth of it, about just over an eighth of the cost.
And who's the charter company? Like which one of their cronies? There's kickbacks everywhere. You gotta look.
It circulates.
That's a good point.
If you like the Young Turks, you'll love Young Turks membership. TYTnetwork.com/join.